Hello, viewers. Hello, students. Welcome to today's lesson. Welcome to a brand new video. Today's lesson, we shall be looking at a topic under the grammatical structure, which is the clause. And I received a lot of messages from you, most of my students and viewers, to treat this topic, clause, and even the phrase. So I've decided to use this lesson to discuss the clause, and then I shall be doing another video to discuss the phrase so that we can differentiate these concepts, especially for students preparing for SSC, to help you to identify grammatical names and functions under the aspect of comprehension. So if you are new to this channel, please feel free to subscribe to my channel and also like and share my videos, and also smash the notification bell to be notified every time I upload a brand new video. This is an educational channel for topics under the English language. So feel free to partner with me, and I'll be delighted to have you on board. So without further ado, let's look at today's topic, the clause. We shall look at the definition of the clause, the types of clauses, and various examples as well. So what exactly is a clause? What do we mean by the term clause? Now, a clause refers to a group of words that contains a subject and a finite verb. A clause refers to a group of words that contains a subject and a finite verb. Now we have two key terms here, subjects and we have finite verb. Now, for those who don't know, the subjects in this context in grammar means the performer or the instigator of an action, the doer of an action, or the performer or the instigator of an action. For example, in the sentence, the boy kicked the ball. The boy kicked the ball. In that sentence, the boy is the subject because the boy is performing the action of kicking. So the boy is the performer or the doer of the action, and so he is the subject. Now, how about a finite verb? What do we mean by a finite verb? Of course, we know that a verb is a word that expresses action. That's a verb. So when we say a finite verb, we're referring to a verb that agrees with a particular subject. A finite verb works with a particular subject in a sentence. Now, the subject may be visible or hidden, but there must be a subject that a particular verb works with before it can be considered a finite verb. For example, in the sentence I gave you, the boy kicked the ball. The verb kicked is a finite verb because it agrees with the subject, the boy. Okay? Yes, because it agrees or it works with the subject, the boy. That makes it a finite verb. Therefore, that expression, the boy kicked the ball, is a clause because it has a subject, the boy, and it has a finite verb, kicked. Kicked is a finite verb, don't forget, because it agrees with the subject, the boy. So a finite verb must agree with a subject, must work with a subject in that sentence before it can be considered a finite verb. If there is no subject at all, whether visible or hidden, then any verb there is not a finite verb, and that will not make that expression a clause. That expression will not be considered a clause because a clause must have both a subject and a finite verb. Now let's look at examples of clauses. The first example here is I attended the meeting. I attended the meeting. Now, why is this a clause? This sentence is a clause because, first of all, it has a subject, which is I, the performer of the action, and then we have a finite verb here, attended. Attended is a finite verb because it agrees with the subject I. It works with the subject I, and that is why it is a finite verb. Now, because this expression has both a subject I and a finite verb attended. This can be considered a clause. And we have another example here. If you study, you will pass the test. If you study, you will pass the test. This is a two-clause sentence. The first clause we have here is if you study. Now we have the subject here, you, and we have the finite verb study, agreeing with this particular subject. That's the first clause. And then the second clause, of course, we have you will pass the test. You is our subject here. And then we have your modal auxiliary verb and the main verb here will pass, agreeing with the subject you. That makes this another clause. So this is a two-clause sentence. Two clauses coming together to form this sentence. And that is why this is a clause. Now, let's come to a three-clause sentence. What we have here is a three-clause sentence. When he arrived, he saw me and he gave me a book. When he arrived, he saw me and he gave me a book. Now, like I told you, it's a three-clause sentence. The first clause is when he arrived. It's a clause because we have our subject here and you have the verb here. It's a finite verb because it agrees with the subject he. The second clause here, he saw me. We have our subject here, he, and we have our finite verb here agreeing with the subject he. And in our last clause, he gave me a book. We have our subject here, he, and we have our finite verb gave agreeing with the subject he. And so this is a three clause sentence. So I believe now you understand how to identify clause. It must have a subject and a finite verb, and that's what makes it a clause. Now let's come to the types of clauses. We have two major types of clauses, and the first one is the independent clause, also known as the main clause. Now, what is an independent clause? It can make a complete, meaningful sentence on its own. So, an independent or main clause can make a complete, meaningful sentence on its own. That means it can stand on its own as an independent sentence. And that's what makes it an independent clause or a main clause. Now, in a sentence, two independent clauses can be joined by coordinating conjunctions. In a sentence, two independent clauses can be joined by coordinating conjunctions. And these coordinating conjunctions are and, but, or, nor, or so. So when we have two independent clauses and you want to join them together, of course, we know that conjunctions are linking words. They are words that join sentences. So if you have two independent clauses and you want to join them together to make one compound sentence, if you have two or more independent clauses and you want to join them together to make one compound sentence, we use coordinating conjunctions. That will be and, but, or, nor, or so. Examples of independent clauses. The first one, he went home. He went home. Remember, an independent clause can make complete, meaningful sense on its own. Now, this expression is a clause because it has a subject, he, and it has a finite verb, went, which agrees with the subject, he. And it can make complete, meaningful sense on its own. And that is why it is an independent clause. It's a clause because it has a finite verb. Went is a finite verb in this context because it agrees with the subject, he. And that is why it's a clause, and that is why it is an independent clause. Second, can you go home? Can you go home? This is a clause because it has a subject here, you, and then you have the finite verb go. Go is a finite verb because it agrees with the subject, you. Because can is our modal auxiliary verb. And it is an independent clause because it can stand on its own and make complete, meaningful sense as a sentence. And that is why it is an independent or main clause. Now let's look at another example here. We have go away, go away. Now you might ask, where is the subject here and where is the finite verb? Now the subject here is hidden. You could say, can you go away? Can you go away? But that you is a hidden subject. I told you earlier that the subject could be visible or hidden. In this context, the subject is a hidden subject. And so you is the hidden subject. So go is our finite verb, agreeing with the hidden subject you. And that is why this is still a clause. So don't be confused. It's still a clause because there is a hidden subject you. You could say, can you go away? But that you is a hidden subject. So you just say go away as a directive or a command. So this go is a finite verb because it agrees with the hidden subject you. And this can make complete sense on its own. It can stand on its own in English and make complete sense. And that is why this expression is an independent clause. Now, for the last example here, you see that James talks too much, but he is intelligent. James talks too much, but he is intelligent. Now, I told you previously that two independent clauses can be joined by a coordinating conjunction. Now, this sentence is made up of two independent clauses. The first one is James talks too much. It is a clause because it has a finite verb talks, which agrees with the subject James. So that's why it's a clause. And it is an independent clause because it can stand on its own. The second one is he is intelligent. It's a clause because it has the finite verb is, agreeing with the subject he. So that's why it's a clause, and it can stand on its own as well and make complete sense. Now, these two independent clauses are joined by the coordinating conjunction but, but to form one sentence, one compound sentence. And that's why I said that we use the coordinating conjunctions and, but, or, nor, so to join two independent clauses and make it one sentence. The second type of clause is the dependent clause, also known as the subordinate clause. Now, for the dependent clause, it cannot function on its own and is used with the independent clause to complete the sentence. It cannot function on its own and is used with the independent clause to complete the sentence. That means that for in the case of the dependent clause, it cannot make complete meaningful sense as a sentence, and it is used alongside the independent clause to complete the entire sentence. Now, the subordinating conjunctions are used to introduce dependent clauses. Now, previously we talked about coordinating conjunctions. That was but, and, or, nor, so. Now, we also have subordinating conjunctions. Conjunctions like although, despite, whereas, um, however, amongst others. They are known as subordinating conjunctions. Conjunctions that are outside the coordinating conjunctions are referred to as the subordinating conjunctions, and they are used to start or introduce dependent clauses. We use the subordinating conjunctions to begin dependent clauses, and that is how we identify dependent clauses. Now let's look at examples of the dependent clauses. Now the first one we have here, I saw the woman whose purse was stolen. I saw the woman whose purse was stolen. Now the dependent clause is underlined. Whose purse was stolen is the dependent clause. Now I have used it alongside the independent clause because I told you earlier that the dependent clause cannot make complete sense on its own. And that is why it is used with the independent clause. I saw the woman to make the sentence complete. So I saw the woman is the independent clause, while whose purse was stolen is the dependent clause. So the dependent clause is underlined. This is a clause because it has a finite verb, um, was as your auxiliary verb, and stolen. Okay, it agrees with the subject, the person who carries the action of stealing. This agrees with that, although this is the passive voice. Yes, but it agrees with the performer of the action, the person who carries out the action of stealing. That's the subject. That is why this is a clause. But it is a dependent clause because it is introduced with a subordinating conjunction, whose. You know, we said earlier that we use subordinating conjunctions to introduce the um, dependent clause. So whose here is a subordinating conjunction used to introduce this dependent clause. And that is why this is a dependent clause. It cannot make sense on its own until it is used with the independent clause to complete the sentence. Second example, although he is tall, he cannot play basketball. Although he is tall, he cannot play basketball. The dependent clause is underlined as well, and while the independent clause is not underlined. Now, he cannot play basketball is the independent clause. It can stand on its own, but although he is tall is the dependent clause. It cannot stand on its own until it's used with the independent clause. Now, this is a clause because it has a finite verb is agreeing with the subject he. Now, although is a subordinating conjunction used to start or introduce a dependent clause. Like I told you earlier, we use these conjunctions to start or introduce a dependent clause. So this is the dependent clause used alongside the independent clause. Let's look at another example again. I don't know where he lives. I don't know where he lives. Now, here also the dependent clause is underlined. Where he lives is the dependent clause introduced by the subordinating conjunction where. I don't know is independent and it can stand on its own, but where he lives is not independent, it is dependent, and that is why it is used with the independent clause. This is a clause because lives is a finite verb that agrees with the subject he. That is why it is a clause, but it is a dependent clause and it must be used with I don't know to complete the sentence. If you don't sing, I won't sing. If you don't sing, I won't sing. Similarly, the dependent clause is underlined, introduced by the subordinating conjunction if. Okay, yes, it's a clause because it has a finite verb, okay, agreeing with the subject you. Okay, while I won't sing is the independent or main clause, but if you don't sing is the dependent or subordinate clause. You have to use this with the independent clause to complete the sentence. So as you can see, the dependent clause can come at the beginning of the sentence or at the end of the sentence. It can appear at any position of the entire sentence. And the last example, she bought a dress which was expensive. She bought a dress which was expensive. Again, the dependent clause is underlined and introduced by the subordinating conjunction which. Now, this is a clause because it has um, the verb here, the final verb was, agrees with um, the hidden subject it. Okay, yes, hidden subject it or the dress, the dress. Okay, so you can see that which here is our subordinating conjunction used to introduce this dependent clause. That is why this is a dependent clause and it has to be used with the independent clause to complete the sentence. So that's about it on our video today on clause. So far, we've defined a clause as a group of words that contain a subject and a finite verb, and we know types of um, clauses: the independent clause, also known as the main clause, and the subordinate clause, also known as the dependent clause. So I believe with this short video, you'll be able to identify clauses in sentences. And my next video, I'll be looking at phrases so that you'll be able to identify phrases as well. So that if you're asked to mention the grammatical names of a particular expression, you'll be able to tell whether the expression is a phrase or a clause. So please watch out for my next video so that you'll be able to distinguish phrases from clauses. Thank you so much for watching this video. Once again, if you're new, please subscribe to this channel and also like and share my videos. Also, feel very free to drop a comment in the comment section below. If you have topics that you'd like me to treat in English language, I'll gladly do that for you. Also, smash the notification bell to be notified every time I upload a brand new video. Until next time, folks, thank you so much. Take care and peace.